Good morning. I am Andrew Hottram and I am an SSP here at Westgate. I have been in the Canadian Armed Forces for 28 years and I am a Chief Warrant Officer and the Regimental Sergeant Major for 38th Service Battalion. 38th Service Battalion has units in Thunder Bay, Winnipeg, Regina, and Saskatoon. This past year, I was assigned to secondary duty as the Territorial Battle Group Sergeant Major for 38 Canadian Brigade Group. The Territorial Battle Group is the domestic response company for any national emergencies such as floods and forest fires. During the pandemic, I was the Task Force Sergeant Major for Op Vector and Op Laser. Op Vector and Op Laser was the Canadian Forces response to the pandemic and the Canadian Forces support to the vaccine rollout. The area I was the Sergeant Major for was from White River to the Manitoba border. I have also served on Op Palladium in Bosnia-Herzegovina during the Civil War in the former Yugoslavia. As well, I served OutCam with Cooperative Osprey, which was a NATO-led training mission shortly after the fall of the Iron Curtain in Russia. 2023 marks 100 years since the beginning of the First World War, a conflict that changed the course of history and the war that was termed the war to end all wars. Its repercussions still echo today. Century-old empires were swept away, map borders were redrawn, and society was shaken by the bloodiest war that we have ever seen. This year also commemorates the 79th anniversary of the Normandy invasion, a tide-turning event that would lead to the end of World War II. On that day, 14,500 Canadians landed on Juno Beach and 450 paratroopers landed behind enemy coastal defenses, allowing for the invasion that would begin the end of the war. Sacrifices from World War II brought us advances in human rights, social justice, and the establishment of the United Nations. So each year on November 11th, Canadians pause in a silent moment of remembrance for the men and women who have served and continue to serve our country during times of war, conflict, and peace. More than 2.3 million Canadians have served our country in these ways, and more than 118,000 have died. Their sacrifices have given us the opportunity to pursue our dreams and to realize our potential as individuals. Let us not forget.
We often turn to poetry on Remembrance Day, perhaps because poets are skilled at putting feelings into words. Almost every Canadian knows John McCrae's In Flanders Fields and is aware of that poem's role in helping to make the poppy our symbol of remembrance for our war dead. McCrae's poem speaks of Flanders Fields, but the subject is universal. The fear of the dead that they will be forgotten, that their deaths will have been in vain. Our acts of remembrance today and our use of the poppy are to demonstrate that we have not forgotten the sacrifices that were made for us. The actual vow that we will remember them comes from a young man who took up his pen during the early days of World War I, when the casualty lists were long and the outlook was bleak. In the stanzas to follow of his poem For the Fallen, clergyman Robert Binion touched so many people that those lines have been engraved on countless memorials and gravestones across the world and are spoken during Remembrance Day services throughout the world. They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, or the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we shall remember them.
In Flanders Fields.
In Flanders Fields, the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the gun below.
We are the dead, short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow.
Loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Fields.
Take up our quarrel with the foe, to those from failing hands we throw. The torch be yours to hold it high, if ye break faith with us who die. We shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders Field.
The Canadian National Vimy Memorial is a powerful symbol of remembrance and national identity for Canada. It was erected to honor the Canadian soldiers who fought in the Battle of Vimy Ridge during World War I, April 1917. The monument has great significance for Canada. It represents sacrifice. The monument stands on the very ground where Canadian soldiers bravely fought and as a solemn reminder of the thousands of Canadian lives lost in this battle. Unity, the unity of the Canadian forces where all four divisions of the Canadian Corps fought together for the first time. It symbolizes the coming of age of Canada as a nation. National identity, it has become an enduring symbol of Canadian pride and identity. Peace and remembrance, the monument stands as a commitment to never forget the sacrifices made during the war and the ongoing pursuit of global peace. The Vimy Ridge Monument is a powerful reminder of our nation's history, values, and sacrifices.
The Remembrance Day poppy has a connection to Thunder Bay. After the First World War, there was a War Veterans Conference held at the Port Arthur Hotel in Thunder Bay. One of the invited guests, Madame Guérin, was a war worker from France. Madame Guérin collected and brought with her poppies from the former battlefields. At the conference, she proposed the idea of wearing poppies on the left collar directly above our hearts for remembrance. So, from this conference, after the First World War, in our town, the tradition of wearing the poppy as a symbol of remembrance was born.
Canadian Indigenous veterans have reason to be proud of their wartime contributions. 1 in 3 was the able-bodied Canadian First Nations, Métis and Inuit men of age to serve who enlisted during the First World War. Many Indigenous people lived in isolated areas of the country where the guns of Europe were especially distant. Yet approximately 4,000 Canadian First Nations people left their homes and families to help fight an international war that raged in European battlefields. Many Indigenous men brought valuable skills with them when they joined the military. Patience, stealth, and marksmanship were well-honed traits for those who had come from communities where hunting was a cornerstone of daily life. These attributes helped many of these soldiers become successful military sharpshooters and reconnaissance scouts. Indigenous soldiers earned at least 50 decorations for bravery during the war. In our area, approximately 100 Ojibwe from isolated areas of north of Thunder Bay made their way to the nearest recruiting centers in either Port Arthur or Fort William. Many of them served in Thunder Bay's 52nd Battalion, and at least 6 were awarded medals for bravery. It is estimated also that more than 7,000 Indigenous people served in the First and Second World Wars and the Korean War, and a number of Inuit and Métis also participated. Indigenous Canadians have demonstrated time and time again their great service and sacrifice, particularly in times of conflict for our country through their participation in Canada's military. National Aboriginal Veterans Day is observed each year on November 8th.
One of the least talked about wars is the Korean War, and yet the results of that war still reverberate with existing tensions along the demilitarized zone between North Korea and South Korea. The hostilities on the peninsula began on June 25, 1950, when the forces of North Korea crossed the 38th parallel. In the Korean conflict, Canada provided military forces to support UN operations. All told, 26,791 Canadians served during the 1950 to 1953 war. Canadian casualties amounted to 1,558, including 516 killed. While much of the hard slogging fell to the infantry, the Korean War was also fought by air and sea operations with the Royal Canadian Navy and the Royal Canadian Air Force contributing. The war also marked the first time in history that an international organization, the UN, had intervened with a multinational force to stop aggression. This idea of using the Canadian military as a peacekeeping force to stop war has been around since the 1950s, and these interventions take place in many parts of the world to this day. More than 125,000 Canadian Armed Forces members have served in international peacekeeping missions to dozens of countries over the past 7 decades. Troops who serve in UN operations typically wear blue helmets or berets, iconic headwear that has come to symbolize peacekeeping for many people. Peacekeeping missions often have positive effects, but the difficulties they present are not easy to handle. Being separated from friends and family for months at a time, witnessing extreme violence, facing the possibility of having to use force, and living with the realization that you could be killed or badly wounded are some of the challenges that peacekeeping veterans know well. Approximately 130 Canadian Armed Forces members have died during peace support operations, and many more have suffered physical and psychological wounds that can last a lifetime. All in the service of peace.
During the Second World War, Canadians saw action on both sides of the world, taking part in conflict across the Pacific Ocean in places like Hong Kong and Burma, as well as many places on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. Canadians were significant contributors in liberation of Netherlands, the Battle of the Atlantic, the Italian Campaign, and the Battle of Normandy, where on June 6, 1944, Canadians landed on the beaches of Normandy and helped begin the liberation of Western Europe. 1.6 million Canadians have served their country during wartime. Many of these were teenagers. War cemeteries in places such as France, Belgium, Holland, Italy, and Hong Kong have the names of 18 and 19-year-old soldiers, pilots, or sailors who left their job or schooling and went to war. Thousands never had a chance to grow old. The horror that Canadians faced at home was of a different kind, the kind that made people watch the front gate and hope that the telegraph boy was not delivering a message from the Department of National Defense reporting that a husband, a wife, a daughter, or a son had been killed. During the two world wars, more than 100,000 such telegrams were received.
The day I shipped out, they numbered a dozen. Upon my return, we're 100 or so. From the coast and from the prairies, I bet they keep coming. Add one more name from Ontario and carry me home down the highway of heroes. People above with the flags flying low. Carry me softly down the highway of heroes. True patriot love, there was never more. I served with distinction, no visions of glory. I served without question, of personal gain. Seek no justification, it's not part of my story, and it offers no comfort to the ones who remain. Just carry me home down the highway of heroes. People above, let the flags flying low. Carry me softly down the highway of heroes. True patriot love, there was never more.
Why are they selling poppies, Mummy? Selling poppies in town today. The poppies, child, are flowers of love for the men who've marched away. But why have they chosen a poppy, Mummy? Why not a beautiful rose? Because, my child, men fought and died in the fields where the poppies grow. But why are the poppies so red, Mummy? Why are the poppies so red? Red is the color of blood, my child, the blood that our soldiers shed. The heart of the poppy is black, Mummy. Why does it have to be black? Black, my child, is the symbol of grief for the men who never came back. But why, Mummy, are you crying so? Your tears are giving you pain. My tears are my fears for you, my child, for the world is forgetting again. Please stand and remain standing for the playing of the last post, after which we will observe 1 minute of silence. During this time of reflection, please pause to honor, thank, and remember our fallen. Then we will conclude with the reveille. This concludes Westgate's 2023 Remembrance Day service.